Okay, we are finally sorted out. Kevin got in touch with me and we are now live on YouTube so we can actually start our meeting. Sorry for the delay.
Thanks so much, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa.
No problem.
Right, so we're live now?
Yes.
Okay. And Cindy's here?
Yes, I am. I'm going to note the meeting going live at 6:21, 6:22.
Okay, perfect. Let's just take care of some housekeeping. Meeting minutes from the 28th. Anybody have any questions or comments or corrections to the meeting minutes of the 28th? Nope. Seeing none, hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes of the 28th? Come on, Antonio.
You probably can't.
Right, I know.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second it. All in favor? All right.
Aye.
All right, we've adopted the meeting minutes. Kathy Ann, do you have a trustees report or?
Nothing super exciting. I can report that we've been working on some changes to our parking, specifically in key locations adjacent to restaurants and businesses throughout the village, and making them, the ones that are in the parking lots, making them a time 2-hour limit, as opposed to somebody being able to park there, indefinitely for days on end, to help, with the turnover for the restaurants and the businesses. So that's something that I've been working on today. And we've been meeting with the parking committee and the Business Improvement District and the Chamber of Commerce and getting business input. And it seems like something that everybody's in favor of. So that's going to be a good and positive change that's coming. And the other thing we're working on, and if you guys haven't signed up for it, please do, which is our new newsletter that's coming out, the Port e-report. It's going to have all kinds of good information from our board meetings, up and coming events, just, little tidbits here and there of what's going on, mostly kind of, behind the scenes, things that people don't see as they walk up and down, Main Street and East Main Street. But yet, as you guys all know, there's so much going on that the general public doesn't get to see. So it's a lot of good information, and that will be coming out. I'm hoping to see the first issue next week, and we'll be continuing that monthly. So if you didn't sign up for that, you can go on to the Port Jeff website and very easy, click a button, add your name and email address, and that will be coming right to your inbox. And that's pretty much it for my report.
All right, very good. Anybody have any questions for Kathy Ann? Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Not a problem. Thank you, Kathy Ann.
Thank you.
Lisa, you want to give us a little bit of a overview? Because I understand, talking to Allison the other day, that we're going over the application. It looks like there's a lot of things going on here.
This is a little different than most of the applications we see because it's not an area variance, it's a use variance. So you'll be familiar with this, that it's a totally separate set of criteria from the area variance criteria, and they're much higher bars to meet. The site is in our RO district on 25A, and it has an existing CEU for a 2-story single-family frame dwelling with 1-story office and detached frame garage. That's from 1998. The history of the file is that, over time it got the CEU in 1998 for this use. In 2004, they did some interior renovations and there was a CC for that in the file. There was then a site plan that was submitted to expand the downstairs office use in 2006. And at that time, it was noted that there was an apartment upstairs and it was still a mixed use dwelling where there was an architectural office on the first floor and an apartment upstairs, as per the application at the time. So that expansion was made. It was CO'd in 2007. And then this year it was recognized there was no business registration or apartment license on file. And the fire marshal went to conduct the inspection for that and realized there was actually no apartment in this building. So this is how this came up. So this building's been there for a long time. This particular applicant has been using this building for a long time. It's always been in our files as a conforming use because mixed uses are permitted in the RO. Upon the fire marshal inspecting and realizing there was no mixed use in the building, it became apparent that this was actually not complying with our code and was a freestanding office in the RO where that type of use is not permitted. So the applicant is now seeking relief via a use variance to allow them to have a freestanding office in the RO district.
And Lisa, they have no intention of they do not want to put the apartment back because they want strictly a variance for office only, correct?
Yes, they do not want to have an apartment in it.
Could you
All right.
speak? I read some in the documentation that was sent out. Could you speak a little bit to the conversation that happened around whether that apartment to satisfy the conditional use would need to be accessed separately than through these? If they were going to put it back, there was I'm sorry, I'm trying to get your clarification on some of the things I was reading in the file about whether they could be needed to be separately accessed or through the office.
Yeah, so there was a question as to whether they could set up an apartment in the upstairs that you would access through going through the main part of the office into it. And the consensus between the building inspector and I believe it was Jen Sigler who sent the email regarding that was that no, it really that it needs to be a separate apartment that doesn't need secondary access for you need to be able to come into your dwelling without crossing through somebody else's private space to do it.
So what about in a scenario where you have in RO a house which is more a house but still has an office in it, like an owner operated office? Often it's my understanding that they're often connected. Like if its owner lived in, then you wouldn't need separate entrances. In this case, to make it convincingly a residential unit, you kind of would have to. But but go ahead.
That would depend for the use as permitted in RO, which is having a mixed use building. As a mixed use, it would need the separation, and that mostly my understanding is coming through building code. What you're talking about is a home occupation where you have a percentage of the house which is separately regulated under state building code, where only a certain percentage, only one employee is permitted. But when you have this, there's different separations that have to happen between a truly commercial non-residential use and a residential use, which is why the separation would be required from a separate stairway.
The threshold that they jumped was essentially number of employees. If it were a tiny, mom and pop operation, they could be regulated as if they lived in a separate.
If I owned a house
district.
and I had my law office downstairs and I had one clerk at the front table,
exactly.
This has certainly been. I mean, it's an excellent architectural firm. They're a very active architectural firm. It's, I believe, been a pretty significant amount of time since it was a small single person office. So that's where the difference would come in.
And I think I read that, and I don't know if it applies in this scenario here, but they can share a vestibule, right? So the entrance could share a vestibule, but
they have to be separated spaces. Yeah, they have to be separated spaces. Independent.
Basically, is it the same configuration as would be required by two separate rentable units, or one just happens to be not residential? Got it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
A couple of things I want to bring up to the board. Tonight, we're doing a use variance, which, as we know, is different than an area variance. They have to meet all the criteria, and there are 4 criteria. Does everyone know the criteria? Or are they aware what the criteria are? All right, good answer. You guys have been doing your trainings. That makes Allison happy. There's a couple of things here. Just you guys, if you look through the file, back in 2006, they got the CEU or the CO for this building. One of the things that I noticed about it when I looked through some of the minutes is that the architect represented himself, and we use architects' testimony as almost expert testimony. We've accepted that in the past as expert testimony. Perfect example of that was Jaeger back in the day. So that carries a lot of weight. So for them to come in and now say, oh, no, it was never that way, or whatever they're going to present, is going to be, they're going to have to come up with some significant documentation and some significant, I guess, evidence to really overturn that, because they're really flying against all the paperwork they have in order.
Not quite. I mean, so really from a use variance perspective, they really just have to be able to produce exactly what their criteria says. So like the competent financial evidence, they actually have to provide the competent financial evidence, that sort of thing. I don't know that from just the writing your findings and legality perspective, too much of the past file, unless it goes directly towards one of the criteria, is not as much at issue, because we're not talking about a CEU here. We're talking about a use variance. So it's the original evidence that is being brought in for this. Anything in the file that speaks to any of those criteria certainly can be considered by the board. But unless it speaks directly to the criteria, because we're not dealing with the CEU here, it's not as much of an issue.
So
Right,
may I ask, to paraphrase? So basically, if they were claiming that they had not had an apartment for a long time and therefore should be the equivalent of grandfathered, they'd be asking for a CEU and not a use variance. And instead what they're saying is, we used to have an apartment, we don't anymore. That puts us outside of the conditional uses and we'd like a use variance therefore.
Yes. So, but what to keep in mind from one of the reasons they're not coming for a CEU is because in 1998, they were issued a CEU. So
Right.
that's well after incorporation of the village, well after any changes in the RO zone permitting freestanding office took place. So that's why they're not here for a CEU, because they have one. It says it. So now we're here to they're coming before you to go through the use variance criteria.
But, all right, Allison, I just got a quick question for you then you've kind of threw me off a little bit. They have a CEU,
Sorry.
I see that, no problem. They have a CEU for two-story dwelling, one-story office from 1998.
Mhm.
Now they're coming in for a use variance to say just office. And
Just
no,
office.
just office. But wouldn't the use variance then be contradictory to the CEU? And,
Yes, because they changed it. So if they get the use variance, they would get a new occupancy document that says freestanding office.
okay.
But the
they
use
would-
variance has to be granted because it's the change of use to a use that does
Right.
not comply with the code. So upon granting of a use variance, the old CEU is now just some nice history for the file, and a new document would be issued.
They're asking for a change. This is about the future, not the past.
Okay.
Have any similar use variances been issued in the RO district?
What's fun about use variances is that they don't create a precedent. One of your criteria is about how unique the particular property is. And it has to be uniquely set for compared to all other properties. The purpose behind a use variance is to ensure that the village never creates a code that makes a particular parcel valueless, without value. So it gives the property owner the opportunity to appeal and say, listen, I know you say I can't have this use and I could only have these uses, but these uses you permit doesn't allow me to have a reasonable return on my property. You've made my property essentially with little value. So it's a way to make sure that the village isn't zoning value out. But one of those required criteria is that that particular property has to be unique compared to all the other properties in the zone. So because of that uniqueness, if the applicant's able to prove through their evidence that this property is unique and different from everyone else in the zone, therefore it can't create a precedent because it's different than everybody else.
But that's not about its history. That's about its present characteristics.
The physical,
Okay.
the actual property as it stands, yes. So there's, unlike area variances where we always are talking about precedent, this is one of those strange cases where you look at things in a vacuum.
May I ask one other question? Sorry, go ahead. It's a change in topic, so if somebody else was asking on that still, go ahead.
Just to be very clear then, so if we were hypothetically to grant this use variance, it would not establish a precedence in the district?
No, it does not.
Okay.
And
I'm sorry,
okay, and it doesn't establish a precedence of standard for the acceptance of the uniqueness by the board or the economic hardship. Okay.
application is unique to itself.
Just to mention, it is 6:36 right now, so I don't want to interrupt anyone, but perhaps we should take some of these questions into public hearing or after the public hearing portion closes and you have time to discuss.
Just give us 2 more minutes, Lisa, just because we started late. So Andrew, go ahead. And then Allison, I got a quick question for you. So go ahead, Andrew.
I had 2 questions. One are, in the case where you're granting a use variance, are conditions ever appropriate? Just so I understand the context that
No.
we're in. No, unlike area variances that we've granted in the past. Okay. And the other one is
You're just meeting the criteria.
The property next door, I remember we had before us a number of years ago and allowed to be an office. Was that a use variance?
That was the CEU.
Really?
Yes,
They
that was
have
the
happened.
CEU.
Because that was built after incorporation. They got a permit for a two-family
So
residence or something.
The way it worked with that one was that, yes, it was built after incorporation, but there was the change for a long period of time. The RO permitted freestanding office. That's why you have so many of them. And this was built as a freestanding office and existed prior to the change where they started prohibiting freestanding office.
It wasn't
So
how I
that's-
remember it, but if it wasn't
how-
a use variance, that's.
Yeah,
the key.
no,
Okay.
that wasn't a use. That was the CEU because it had actually been built and occupied prior to the change in the code prohibiting freestanding office. So basically,
you.
they got a CEU to make themselves a non-conforming use. That's
Got it.
not what's before the board tonight.
Thank you.
Allison, I have one quick question for you. I know the past is the past and we're going from this point on. Question I have for you is what if they, for some reason, what if they make some statement like, there's never been an apartment up there, it's always been office? Does that then bring the past into play?
Nope, because again, it's not a CEU.
Then they would have to go back and ask us for something else instead. They brought the wrong application if that's the argument they're making.
And again, because the CEU was issued in 1998, the reason we don't have a CEU application here is that CEU was granted at a time where freestanding office was prohibited. So somewhere in there, a change happened. I don't have exactly the timeline, or I wasn't in the building, so I don't know where that is. But a
Right.
CEU was issued in 1998. There were interior renovations then approved. Then there was a site plan approval that indicated that there's an apartment in the building, and therefore the expansion was permitted, relying upon that indication. But the past, if we're in a CEU, we only care about the past. In use variance, what you're looking at is whatever evidence is presented to the board.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Lisa?
And that concludes my presentation.
Lisa, if you could open up the meeting.
All right, I will open the meeting and I will bring in, the meeting's been open in public, but I will bring in Andrew, who is representing the applicant. Let me promote Andrew Malganara to panelist.
Good evening, Andrew. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
Good. Just hold on one second. For the public watching, this is the February 25th Zoning Board of Appeals for the Village of Port Jefferson's meeting. Tonight we have one application on the agenda. The application is for 1213 Main Street, appeal number 562-21. Suffolk County Tax Map Number, Section 17, Block 5, Lot 7. Zoning RO Residential Office. Property owner is Barbara Grillo. Applicant is Andrew Malguanera, care of Brookhaven Expeditors. Contact is Andrew Malguanera, care of Brookhaven Expeditors. The description is a use variance request. Applicant requests the use of a variance to maintain an existing office use in the RO zone where the Incorporated Village of Port Jefferson Code, Section 250-16, allows for one-family dwellings as a permitted use and as conditional uses, two-family dwellings and a mixed residential office uses. All others are expressly prohibited. This evening, we have Andrew Malguanera. Andrew, can you just get sworn in, please, by the stenographer? Hold on, I just need her to unmute.
Do you, Andrew, do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
And Andrew, just give us your information.
Andrew Malguanera, 713 Main Street, Port Jefferson, agent for the applicant.
Excellent. Andrew, you are welcome to begin your presentation.
All right. So basically what we're going after here is the CEU, which is issued in 1998. We feel the evidence that the village has in support of said CEU is not exactly a smoking gun. I mean, all the CEU says it's a office/residential use, which at the time in 1998, the owner of said building did in fact live in the building. So for him to sign an affidavit stating it's residential/office use doesn't really change the fact that doesn't show the fact that there was a separate apartment in this building. There was a kitchen on the first floor, which there is currently still, and that's how it was used. So the affidavits that the village has showing that as residential/office, it doesn't say apartment, it says residential. In our opinion, is while semi-accurate at the time, is not what the use the village is going for, is asking my client to do now, which is make a separate apartment out of the existing office, which never was there. There was never a separate access. To do that, you would have to cut off the stairway going upstairs and blow out the wall and make a separate entry deck on the side, and that simply never existed at this office. We feel, although I'm not recognized as an expert, I have been doing this for 17 years. I've done thousands of permits, and I know how it works in the sense of when this was done in 1998, he was selling the property. So in order to sell, he needed to get this CEU issued to have something on record. So at the time, again, not putting words in anyone's mouth because I don't know how it went, but you put what you have to put on the application to get the CEU issued. And and we feel like that's, more or less what happened here. But my client bought that property right after that, and it is how it is now. There was never an apartment. They never removed the apartment. And we feel that we didn't, we feel it was incorrectly labeled when the CEU was issued. As far as the criteria, I feel like we meet all of said criteria in terms of the financial responsibility that would incur. We don't have a formal estimate, but as I said, if you want to show, I submitted pictures of said stairwell. If I don't know if we could pull them up or not.
Lisa, can you put them up for us, please? Can't hear you, Lisa.
We didn't receive any pictures, so I don't have any to show.
All right, I emailed pictures, but regardless,
who did you email them to?
To Cindy.
Andrew, the email I got today had 3 documents.
It wasn't today. It was a day or two ago.
If you want to hold on, I can check.
Yeah, it's not a big deal if you don't have them. Basically, it comes down to the fact that this stairway comes straight from the vestibule right up the stairway. So you would have to section off that stairway and again, blow out the side and put an entry deck on top of that. I mean, it's easily, 10, 20 grand of work in order to do so for unnecessary use in the sense that they're not going to rent this apartment anyway. So it is absolutely unnecessary hardship on that front. The other criteria, alleged hardship relating to the property in question is unique and does not apply not to a substantial portion of the district or neighborhood. The RO district has straight up offices in it. 1031 Main Street had a use variance as well a couple years ago, and they had a CEU just like our client has, and they got granted to change to office use. And we feel that's similar to what we're asking for. Although precedent is not necessarily, part of this application, they did a similar thing. And the definition of a CEU is the fact that this building has been there prior to the village being incorporated. So that being said, did I break up? Okay. So that being said, the CEU this building was here before the village, so shouldn't have to necessarily abide by the RO district. The third criteria is the requested use variance, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. Again, this has been the way this building has been since my client sold it in 1998, and I don't see anything that the village has that shows that this was that this was not that was an apartment / office use. I also submitted plans. It was part of the email that I sent a couple of days ago. I don't know if you saw it, Cindy, that plans that were used for the permitting of prior permits on this file never showed a second kitchen on the second floor. It showed the bathroom, it showed the two rooms, but there was never a kitchen on the plan submitted to the town during all the COs that they got in the interim. So there's no plan showing a second, an apartment use here. Although it was caught at this point, and yes, it is inaccurate with the CEU. It is not. It simply was never there. And again, being that my client bought it directly after the CEU was initially issued, it's almost a he said, she said. Yes, his affidavits say that there was an apartment here, but that there was a residence here. And again, he did live here at the time. So for him to say that wasn't necessarily a lie. Our clients bought this property as is and never took out and never removed a separate entrance. And that's just, the fact. And the fourth criteria is the alleged hardship is not self-created. Again, it's not created by my client at all. This is how they bought the property. They did not remove an apartment. So for them to, buy this property based on the CEU that was issued, they saw the office and bought it as is. And now have been surprised by the fact that they need to have a separate access and a separate apartment because, again, they bought it, they didn't remove it. So for them to now have to put something in that they never did, it is a hardship. And again, it's not self-created by them. If the board has any questions, please, let me know.
So if I understand correctly, you seem to be, the brunt of your argument is that the CEU that you have from 1998 was sort of the result of a miscommunication. Was that the previous owner prior to the sale to the current applicant?
Correct.
Okay, so you're arguing that the CEU acquired for sale by the prior owner was the result of a mistake or a misunderstanding or is not being correctly interpreted today. So you're essentially applying for a new CEU based upon something predating the village code, which is actually not a use variance. So for the property next door that you cited as an example, that wasn't a use variance either. That was a CEU because
it's not next door, it's down the street.
Sorry, 1031. Yes, it's that one was not a use variance. That was a granting of a CEU because its use was demonstrated.
No, it was not. No, it was not. I got that CEU for that building.
Right.
I got the CEU myself, and then Amy DeVito then applied to get that CEU changed from what it was.
Never was there, to my recollection, never was there a use variance application to this board.
If you look at that CEU, the initial, Cindy, if you want to put the CEUs back up, the initial CEU says residence, and then they got granted, and now it says office use.
Right, but the means by which they obtained that, if I recollect, was that they basically demonstrated that the use was continuous and pre-existed the incorporation of the village, and that's what should be done in this case, rather than a use variance.
Real quick point of clarification. Again, for that change in CEU, it wasn't that it was prior to the incorporation of the village, but that the freestanding office building predated the change in the code, which then prohibited freestanding office. That's different than the
Okay,
incorporation.
so
Just
whether
point of
it's,
clarification.
thank you. That's very, very helpful. But my point is that this is what was made then was an argument about how the building has been used and had been used in the past prior to a law change, which it sounds as if is what you're arguing in this case, but that would be, to my understanding, a different application. Am I wrong?
I'm applying for this argument is exactly what we spoke to the village about from the beginning, and this is how we were told to apply. So again, that's not my end of things. This is how we were told to do this.
Lisa, you can take that down, and I don't want to get into an argument here about who said what.
There's no argument.
No. Well, I don't want it to seem that way. I just have a couple of quick things, just housekeeping issues. Cindy, did you find the email from Andrew that was sent to you a couple of days ago?
Andrew, I just searched and I don't have any emails received from you. If you want to resend it, do you have it handy?
I can resend it if you can wait, 1 minute.
You know what? Just send it right to Lisa. That'd be better, right, Lisa?
Yep.
You could put it up quicker. Do you have Lisa's email? If not, then just send it to me.
All right, just give me 30 seconds.
Okay.
Lisa, I have a question for you.
Yes.
The plans that Andrew references, did they match what the building or fire marshal found in the field? To your knowledge?
I don't know. What I know is that the plans submitted to the planning board for consideration for the expansion of the first floor office, which is how it was described to the planning board, was that I don't think anyone ever inspected to see if there was an upstairs apartment, because it was submitted as an upstairs apartment with a first floor office, and they requested an expansion of the office. And because it was a permitted use, they were allowed to expand the office. And the plans that I looked at in relation to that were part of the planning board file, and they didn't show the detail of the upstairs. So.
All right. You want me to send it to Lisa?
If you have her email handy, if not, send it to me because I know you have my email handy.
Yeah.
Whatever's quicker and easier for you, and then I'll make sure it gets up.
And then Cindy will label these as Exhibit 1, Exhibit A, whatever.
Exhibit
format.
A, okay.
Great. Andrew, do you have any more to add? Or I'm going to open it up to the
I do
board
not.
to-
I just sent the plans.
Okay.
Okay. Did you send them to me or?
Both.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Is there anyone else on the board that has any questions or comments for Andrew?
I had a couple more questions, but if anybody else
Sure.
does.
Got it.
I was wondering whether you had any exhibits or submissions relative to the economic hardship criterion or the uniqueness of the property.
I do not, but I'll gladly get a contractor's estimate if the board so sees fit, showing what it would take to section off this part of the property and blow out the wall and add an entry deck, if that's what the board wants. Absolutely.
No, I meant not so much the cost of a modification, but the cost of the economic demonstration that the property is not useful as a mixed use, but only as a full office.
Well, it's not economic, viable because they're not going to rent it. So they're going to do all this for no reason. I mean, at the end of the day, whether they have an apartment for show is one thing, but they're not going to rent it. They have no intention to rent it. So even if they ended up doing, what was required, it would be pointless.
Right. So my question wasn't speaking to the client's intent. It was more to the inherent characteristics of the property.
I mean, it wouldn't change the characteristics at all. This is what it's been.
Thank you.
And that's the second floor plan. Not detailed, but detailed enough to show if there was a kitchen up there, it would show said kitchen. Just shows the bathroom, shows the 2 rooms that are there presently, but does not show a kitchen that would otherwise show.
And Lisa, this matches the plans that you have that the planning board looked at. Am I correct in saying?
I can.
It's approved by the, it's approved by the village on the first page as well.
Okay, so the village has this in there, okay.
Yeah.
You probably,
Right.
I'd have to look at the file to know what part, where it was. It's approved as in conformance with uniform code. So this is not the stamped approved site plan or plans for the planning board. This is stamped by, for complying with New York State code.
I'm also sending the picture of the stairwell going up, if that matters.
And Lisa, can you just put those up too when you get them?
When I get them, I will.
Any board members have any other questions for Andrew? You're sending them over now. Andrew, can you, I have to agree with Andrew. I have to agree with Andrew Thomas that you may have to, I mean, items 1 and 2 are the criteria. I'm just having a little trouble trying to apply this to the property. Could you speak to those a little bit more? The first 2 criteria?
First criteria in terms of cannot realize a reasonable return, provide the lack of return is substantial and demonstrated by competent financial evidence. Yeah, I don't have the financial evidence, but if you look at, this is how it is, and this is how it always was. They would essentially have to make a vestibule of that area and blow out that window. And as I said, you know, make an entry. That's pretty, you know, significant, you know, in my eyes.
And the second one, alleged hardship is unique and does not apply to substantial portion of the district.
It is unique because they never, you know, they didn't do what the village is alleging was there. And it is unique in the sense that they're going to have to then do something that the village issued a CEU based on this current plan that was always there. And they're going to have to then change that plan and do something that wasn't there when they purchased the house based off the CEU. They purchased it right after the CEU was issued. It's not like there was an owner in between that might have changed it and we didn't know about that. My client bought it directly after the CEU was issued, and that being said, it's very, you know, it would be. This is why we're here, because my client's so surprised that they would now have to alter their building that they purchased because they didn't do anything, you know, to warrant, you know, being in the situation to begin with. I feel that's pretty unique.
Lisa, quick question for you. When was the last time staff was inside that building? I know you said they went in for a business or an apartment license in the work session. Can you tell?
I believe it was on May 21st of last year.
What was May 21st was when they discovered this situation? Yes. Do you have any documents that say they were in there prior to that? Like we've done either an inspection or I don't know if when the CEU issue was 98. So
I mean, presumably when the in 2006 they would have inspected the expansion on the first floor, but there wasn't work done on the second floor that was permitted at the time, so there wasn't necessarily an upstairs inspection. There actually is no apartment or business license for the business on file meaning that I don't think there's ever previously been an inspection of the site.
Can I interject for a second?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, Andrew.
So regardless of if the village inspected the upstairs because there was no reason to, they inspected the first floor, of which they would have noticed that there was no separate access to the second floor, as that first floor that second floor directly goes into the first floor. So although they didn't inspect the apartment itself, which again was not there, They would have saw the first floor and saw the fact that there was no separate entrance.
But just to clarify, that wouldn't have been the building inspector's objective at that time. He would have been looking to see that, you know,
Well, yes,
that the construction was done appropriately.
but the
He
plan,
would not have been looking for and he would have been looking for site plan compliance with the approved office extension.
right.
So
But again, the plans were showing it as it is now.
And that's my point, Andrew, is that even though we did the first floor expansion, they would have had to have an updated set of plans, whether they inspected those stairs or not, or was even in that area of the building, that would have shown up. And, you know, so it hasn't been modified after the 2006 CEU.
Well, I would say this: if we were getting into arguing how the property had been and what the evidence suggests, I haven't seen any evidence that there ever was an apartment with a separate entrance. So if at the time that the 98 CEU was awarded, they were calling a small portion of living space connected through the office as mixed use residential office, then they should apply the same standard today, even though the personnel has changed, or fix the old CEU. But none of that is a use variance. In other words, with this application, we can't grant that relief, to my understanding.
Yeah.
It needs to be a different application.
I'm not arguing that in any way. You very well be right, but this is again, like I said.
But I believe you are. You're basically saying, look, you guys have you have a CEU today, and you're saying, yeah, but you guys are reading that CEU. The building department is reading that CEU as saying I've got an apartment, and you see that I don't, by your current interpretation, have an apartment. Therefore, you're surmising that we changed this since 1998. And I'm saying this is what it's always been. Therefore, if you don't like what your CEU says in terms of this being the picture, then we need to either fix that as we would by applying for a new CEU as if that had never been granted, or acknowledge that that interpretation holds and that the village doesn't mind its old wording. But again, none of that is a use variance. Am I missing something?
No, understood. Again, we sat down with staff and asked how should we go about this with the exact arguments, and I'm speaking to everyone now. And this is what we were told to apply for. So whether it's right or wrong, this is what we were told. So if you want us to apply for something else, gladly. At the end of the day, no one's trying to, get up on anybody. We're just trying to get this resolved with what is right. And if that implies us to reapply in some other way, we'll gladly do so. Just let us know how we would do that.
So we are not staff, so I can't speak to that, and that will be a conversation subsequently. But I can't speak to what my other board members say, but as I understand it, we do not have the means or the criteria met currently to grant a use variance for this, right?
I don't. Hold on, Andrew. Yeah. Andrew Melvin. Andrew, do me a favor. Hold on that statement, because number one, we haven't debated this as a board. Right. Andrew is still doing his presentation, so I don't want to jump the gun on that.
But I want to give him an opportunity to answer those questions, though, and we still seem to have a misunderstanding. I don't want to jump the gun on the conversation, and I'll let it go now.
And I understand that, and that was my point in asking the questions I did. Lisa, just do me a favor, confirm what Andrew's telling us, that he's proceeding this way because at the direction of the board.
Not at the direction of the board. He has met with staff, not personally with me, but he has met with staff, or somebody from this project has met with staff at some point. Yeah. And the issue is that they have a CEU issued. At the time that CEU was issued for a permitted use in the district, that time, standalone office was already prohibited in the RO. So even if you said that in 1998, the second this was taken over, it became a standalone office, what you're saying is it's been used in violation of the code since 1998. You're not saying that it was legal when it was put in as this use and was changed. So staff had advised you can't, because we have so much evidence that and regardless of the plans from 2006, the applicant in 2006, John Grillo, did state for the board on the application and in the meeting, and the planner at the time, Will Rao, noted that this was a mixed use with an apartment on the second floor. So it was always the understanding that this was a compliant building. If the building had been CEU'd as a standalone office, The expansion wouldn't have been permitted because it would have been expanding a non-conforming use. So that's, with these understandings, staff said a CEU in this case doesn't make sense because you have one, it's legitimate. It would, what happened in 2006 couldn't have been allowed to happen if you didn't have this CEU and you had a standalone office CEU. So staff advised that you don't have the option of going and getting a CEU because you have a valid one and it for what it was at that time. The only option at that point is to say, you know, you can request a use variance. Now, we didn't advise that that was a likely outcome, but what you're saying is you want to use this property in a way that is not allowed in this district. And that is, you know, that is what you're asking for as a use variance.
May I
Yes.
ask a follow-up question, Lisa?
Yeah.
Hold that thought for a second, Andrew. So it sounds like Andrew's caught in.
Which Andrew?
Sorry, Andrew Malgranera's. It sounds like he's caught between almost a rock and a hard place because he bought for his client to buy this building and to expand it, they had to claim that there was an office, and they did. The reports all say that it was a mixed use, but now he's saying that it was never used that way. And correct me, Andrew Malgranera, if I'm wrong.
Absolutely right. But also, I'm not seeing where the village has anything that there was an apartment in this building. It just says residence/office use.
I can. Do you want me to share I did email you the documents, the supporting documents for the staff memo.
Please.
Do you want me to share those on the screen?
Please.
Okay.
Yeah.
No problem.
And while she's doing that, Andrew, Thomas, go ahead.
Well, that kind of goes to my question too, so I'll let her answer it. I was just wondering whether we had ever any evidence that there was an apartment with a separate entrance. In other words, are we applying a different standard to what is considered an apartment today than was applied when the CEU was granted, and thereby applying that different standard, presuming that there's been a change or not?
The difference on that, Andrew Thomas, is, so there's a CEU that's in the file that says that it was mixed use. So at the time, the understanding is that it was a combination, because as Andrew Malgranera just stated earlier a few times, the previous owner did live and work in the building together.
Right.
Since that time, that has not been how the building has been used, because it became a full office building. So we no longer had a living office as is on the CEU. So again, they have a CEU at the time it was issued in '98, that it was a legal mixed use building that has since been abandoned and is now a freestanding office building. Just like any other now non-conforming use, in order to conform to the code now, because I don't believe the Grillos have any intention to live in the building. I believe Mr. Malgranera has mentioned a number of times that even if an apartment is required to be put in, it would not be their intention to utilize the building as a mixed use. To do that now under our current code and then transfer it into what would be a use that would work and comply with our code, they would then need to have that separation moving forward. It's because there's the abandonment in between, not just, listen, if right now today, a member of the Grillo family who work in the office also lived in the apartment upstairs, there would be no conversation. But the issue at hand, and again, we're still going kind of backwards looking when the use variance is forwards looking. But the reason we're here is that the complying use under the CEU has been abandoned.
Can you abandon the as of right half of a mixed use is the abandoned portion. My apologies. We've had that discussion. I guess what I'm wondering is if in '98, this was beyond the scope of the office, was beyond what would be allowed by an owner occupied in a different purely residential zone. Why at the time, even if it was being slept in by the owner as opposed to some third party, it seems odd that a CEU was granted that called that mixed use. At the time
it was fine, is the point. But again, I would just like to caution the board and remind that I know there's a great deal of history on this property. I know there are a lot of questions, but the 4 queries before you.
I get that. I'm actually asking sort of how the conversation went that he ended up here asking for a thing that has none of the relevance on this, but I'll leave it alone for now. We can get to the end of the hearing.
Lisa, I have a bit of correspondence that came in through the chat, so I'm going to read it into the record. And as far as I know, we don't have any other correspondence. Am I correct in saying that?
No, but you do have people in the waiting room, so we haven't asked for public comment yet. So whenever you do, I'm sure people will raise their hand. I don't know if you want to read this in now, if you want to go through the documents Andrew asked to share, or.
Let me just read this into the record, because this is I'm viewing this as correspondence. So I'm assuming Ms. Fazio is not in the, well.
She is in the waiting room, but I don't know if she's going to stay there.
All right. Well, let me, I'm just going to put that aside. Let's do Andrew's comments first, and then let's go through the application, Lisa, and then I'll read the comments into the record.
Okay. So I'm just showing the things Andrew requested. This is the application from John Grillo that was submitted for the planning board in 2006, and where the property is described, it's RO mixed use office residence, architectural office on first floor and lower level, residence on second floor, was what was described to the village. A secondary document here, you see the documents change, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, making sure, sometimes that doesn't work out. Describes that they're expanding in 870 square foot addition to the existing first floor office, and that it mentions that the CEU is for a single family residence with a one-story office and a detached garage. So confirming the understanding that this is not a freestanding office. Here on the board's agenda, it's discussed that and interestingly, I believe Mark Brosnan voted on this back in,
on the planning board, yes.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so it talks about how the use conforms to the code, the lot is non-complying. So it's very specific. The lot's non-complying because of the distance for the setbacks, but it notes that it's a conforming use, and therefore the expansion is possible. And in this memo from Will Rao, which I also shared with the board and the applicant, he notes the CEU and says this use would be described as a mixed use residence and office studio pursuant to this section of the code, 250-16B2. So there's and there was also, and let's see, maybe there's one more document. I'll stop the share and see if I can pull up one more document that was shared with everyone, if I can find it. This is probably. Okay, and this is the letter that was received by the planning board from John Grillo in 2006. It says that it notes that what it had the CEU for. It says the property has contained a residence on the second floor and an architect's office on the first floor for more than 78 years. And for all 78 years, 1213 Main Street has been a non-complying building as per the section. It describes the reasons it's non-complying because of setbacks.
Andrew Malguanera, just clarify, since John Grillo wrote these letters, who John Grillo is relative to Barbara Grillo, which, just for the record.
Husband.
Okay, thank you.
So, for what it's worth, everything there is reiterating what we're saying, in the sense that it's more a miscommunication of how this was issued, because if you know this building, it's not technically a 3-story building, but there's a lower level that it's the office. The first floor is where the kitchen is and where it currently resides, and then the second floor is an extension of the first floor. So yeah, again, it's how you interpret residential. Yes, there's a kitchen. Yes, you could live there, but so in essence, they didn't change anything. So if we said someone lived on the second floor, it'd be the same. It would be in the same spot, and John Grillo, the son, wanted me to mention the fact that, if he had to make this a separate apartment, he would have to move. He had to move offices because he cannot be without that square footage, and that would be a severe hardship on his part, because he had all, he's been using this building as office, using that square footage as office, and it is essential to his business, and to take that away from him would be, a severe hardship as you could get, and they would no longer be able to utilize said office building because of it. But all that, quote unquote proof, again, is showing the fact that there was a kitchen in this building, which that's not in dispute. There was on the first floor, but there was no separate entrance. There was nothing else. This is how it's been used this entire time. And, if there's anything else to be said, please let me know.
Anybody have any questions or comments? Mr. Malguiner? All right, seeing none, hearing none, I'm going to open it up to the public. Just a point of legality, Allison, you still here?
She's around.
I'm coming. Sorry. Yes, I'm here. Sorry.
Not sure how to handle this from a public legal point of view. I have a chat from Ms. Fazio, who I understand is in the audience. Should I read her chat in as correspondence, or should I see if she wants to speak?
I think we should certainly read it in, but also give the opportunity to Ms. Fazio if she wishes to participate in other ways as well. But yes, I do see it as well. I'm sure the rest of the board can see it. It is, in the weird, odd COVID times we have, how we make our correspondence into the record does get a little bit tricky. But yes, I'd say read it in, and then when you open the floor to the public, see if they would like to expand on that.
Okay. For the record, I have a comment in the chat from Ellen Fazio to all panelists. I've lived across the street from this property since September 1998 and can attest there has never been an apartment in this building. The 1998 CEU issues was incorrect. Lights are out after business hours. So that is the comment. Lisa, if she is in the audience, if you'd like to speak, I'd like to let her comment since she's the first one, and then we'll continue to move on.
If I would offer first that if anyone would like to speak, they can hit the raise hand option, so that if you're not ready to be brought in, and she raised her hand. Here we go. I'm bringing Evelyn Fazio in. She here?
Ms. Fazio, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Would you mind turning your camera on? Is that a problem?
No, not at all. It's a little slow. There it is. Good evening, everyone. Boy, am I glad I sat in on this. Glad I didn't know. But one thing I can say, the Grillos have been great neighbors, and I hope it works in their benefit, because it seems to be a lot of technicalities. I did make a mistake.
Ms. Fazio, just hold on one moment. I just have to swear you in first before you make any other comments, please.
I'm sorry.
Not a problem.
Ms. Fazio, raise your right hand, please. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
And can you state your full name and your address for the record?
Evelyn Fazio, 688 Main Street in Port Jefferson.
You're welcome. I read your chat into the record, and you're welcome to make any further comments.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I made a typo there. I bought the house in September of '96, and I knew the previous owner by watching the house. And he may have, in fact, slept there. He was an older gentleman, an architect. The Grillos bought it 2 years later after I lived here, did wonderful improvements, but there was never an apartment. It seems to be a technicality with the first owners. If it's a use variance, they should, in my opinion, be granted it. They're great neighbors. There is no way that anyone would rent an apartment. I agree. It's not a feasible option, and it seems to be an unfair financial burden for what I consider a very good neighbor. They keep their property up, the adjacent property. But I can attest, I've walked through that property when I had my Labrador to cross Main Street to walk safely, and Mr. Grillo let me walk through the property, and I could see the building. I'm one of those neighbors that a good neighborhood watch, and I know what's going on there. So I can speak from firsthand knowledge. And I watched the expansion of that building over the year. So that is my statement and my input. And I wish it vote in their favor, whatever the village has to do with they should be granted what they're requesting is. And it may be just more of a procedural thing.
Ms. Fazio, if I can just ask you a quick question. To your knowledge, has there ever been an exterior entrance to the second floor apartment, to your knowledge?
No, never. My nephew used to sit back on those benches and when he had fights in the house and would walk across the street and sit back there. I know the property well. As I said, I walk my dog there twice a day through that property for 8 years. So I can speak quite honestly to that fact.
Thank you, Ms. Fazio. Does the board have any questions for Ms. Fazio? Seeing none, hearing none. Thank you very much. I appreciate your input, and I hope you have a good evening.
Thank you. To you as well.
Lisa, you can bring the next person in, please.
All right, one second. If anyone else would like to raise a hand to make a comment, I will bring you into the meeting. So at the moment, there are no raised hands. I don't know if I'll maybe give it a few minutes in case they're trying to figure out how to indicate that they would like to make a comment.
All right,
there are 6 people in the waiting room, including Evelyn, and they you may also type into the chat if that's easier, more convenient way to make a comment, and we'll read it, and Mark will read it into the record.
We'll give them a few minutes. While we're doing that, does the board have any other questions or comments for Andrew Malgranera?
Can I ask the board, regardless of how this was filed or why this was filed, that's a separate issue. But as far as criteria is concerned, what can we go back to that and what criteria we think we are not, following?
I just, I don't know. I can say that we're not following, but you're familiar with the 4 criteria. The first criteria is usually, as it's written, is substantial as shown by competent financial evidence. Right,
and I'll gladly, if it would make a difference to the board, we'll gladly submit after the hearing that financial evidence of that hardship that this would create, if you need to.
If you'd like to do that, I can hold the meeting over until next month to let you submit any other additional documentation
there's no point to rushing it, so we'll gladly do that.
Yeah, I would suggest that might be in your best interest to do that, but again,
absolutely.
Assuming the board all feels the same way when and if I make the motion.
Yeah. The financial hardship is not going to be around like knocking down the wall and putting in a separate entrance, right? The financial hardship that's demonstrated has to revolve around a reasonable return if this use variance is not granted.
Correct. Yeah, we can do that.
Right. Lisa, do you have is there any members that would like to question or comment on this?
No one has added a comment to the chat, and no one has raised a hand to comment. So I don't want to bring anyone in against their will because we are live on YouTube and on Zoom. So unless we see a raised hand, I don't think we need to.
Yeah.
Okay.
And to sum up the rest of the criteria, in the sense that this is unique. I mean, this is as unique as it gets in the sense that my client bought this property as is and didn't change anything, and here we are, because they didn't know that this was an issue until recently, 20 plus years later, and again, it will not alter the essential character neighborhood in any way. Again, it's been like this as far as anyone can else remember. No one knows this property anything else but this office. And it has been, they've been great neighbors to the village, and there's been no issues, and I no complaints in any way, so I don't think it would in any way alter the characteristics of the neighborhood. And again, the 4th one, not self-created, and again, that reiterates what I'm saying. It's clearly not self-created. They didn't do any of this, and it seems to be a technicality how this stuff works. No one meant to do any harm here and put us in this spot, but here we are. And, we're trying to rectify, maybe a mistake, maybe not a mistake, but maybe just an interpretation. And we're looking to hopefully rectify that here.
Are there any other questions or comments from the board for Andrew? Are there any, I'm going to just say it one more time. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak? Please raise your hand now through the icon. I'll give you about a minute or so, or write something in the chat. Andrew, it's my understanding then you'd like us to hold this meeting over so you can present some more evidence? Is that?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yep.
So it might be worth noting that because it'll be held over, people who are in the waiting room will have the opportunity to comment at the next meeting, or if they would prefer to submit comments in writing, if they're having any trouble with the technology, they may feel free to submit them to the department in writing.
At least you don't have anybody that wants to speak right now, correct?
Correct.
All right. I'm going to make a motion at the request of the applicant that we hold the meeting over till the March 2021 ZBA meeting. Can I have a second on that, please?
I'll second that.
A second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Seeing none, hearing none. All right, so Lisa, we're gonna hold this over then. We made a motion.
Yes, that would be, you're holding it over till the March 25th meeting.
Okay,
Okay.
perfect. All right.
I appreciate everyone's time.
Thank you, Andrew, for your time.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Andrew. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool.
Thanks, Allison.
All right.
Thanks, Andrew.
All right. Have a good night, guys.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
And
Mr. Chairman, may I suggest that since we're going to be getting additional information in, that we might wish to hold off on deliberations until we have a full record?
Yes, I didn't plan on deliberating tonight, to be honest with you. So, but thank you. Thank you for the clarification. Always on point.
I have my moments.
More than I do.
Lorraine, I think we're done with the public hearing. So if
I'm gonna leave, okay?
we'll
Thank
miss
you,
you,
Lorraine.
but thank you.
Can I leave?
Yes.
Yes. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Other than that, I think Cindy, we've Cindy, just we're still just SECRA, right? We have SECRA done on this, correct?
SECRA is
Yes.
not done.
Okay.
It's in the,
I'm sorry, planning board. I'm sorry, right? We planning
No,
board. Right?
no, the SECRA, we do actually need to do SECRA because they do not have an application before the planning board. They have filled out the short form EAF. It is an unlisted action. So we have to evaluate, let's see, we have to complete the part 2, I believe. Let me
Lisa,
just,
have you distributed the short form to everyone yet? Was that distributed?
it was distributed with the application. The short form EAF would have gone out with that, which was Cindy would have circulated. I believe it was, I want to say it was on the 8th that she sent that email.
Sure, I have it here somewhere. Anybody have any comments on the SECRA? Antonio, you've been exceptionally quiet. You're scaring me.
No, this was a good one.
You're scaring me.
I'm looking at all the attachments.
Even Lou's been quiet. It's really a scary night.
I've got 3 screens of all the documents up here. You know,
Yeah.
going back and forth. It's a lot to consider.
I don't
Lisa-
know. I'm not sure that any of it's relevant. Like, I don't think we have any documentation to consider for a use variance.
Let's just,
I know. Yeah, I was just gonna say I don't want to do any deliberation right now.
We're not getting into it, but
Right.
gotta wait
Lisa,
till
what-
you have a full record.
Well,
Deliberate
Lisa,
on
one-
a full record.
Lisa, walk us through the SECRA.
So one thing you can do right now is you can declare lead agency, and I can pull up the part 2 of the EAF. If there are no moderate to severe impacts identified in that, then we don't we don't need to upgrade the SECRA because it is not a type 1 action, which is automatically receives a greater intensity review. It is an unlisted, which means the code's silent on it. We have to make the determination by looking at the criteria.
All right, so then do I need to make a motion that the ZBA is going to be the lead agency?
Yes.
Okay. I'll make a motion that the zoning board take lead agency on the SECRA determination. Do I have a second on it?
I'll second that.
Antonio seconded it. All in favor?
Good job.
Aye.
All right, so Lisa, that's taken care of?
Yes. And I can I'll share on the screen for you the part 2. Let me just locate it again. All right, hopefully you have a good view of that. So the part 2 consists of mostly very simple questions. They ask the impact on the land, and you go through and say proposed action may involve construction or physical alteration of the land surface of the proposed site. And in this case, the answer is no. At this point, actually, Allison may need to help here. The long road of this is that because of the type of application it is, it's a use variance. If the use variance is granted, while this
They do nothing.
they do nothing right now, but the implication is that in the future, this land could be developed in a way that different from what it is now. Is that correct?
So if the use variance is granted, it means that they can continue exactly as they are without making any alterations to the property. So we're looking at just the use variance. We're not looking at what future developments might have. They're pretty much built property line to property line. They can't really get much farther.
Yeah.
But so for the use variance, if the granting is just going to be for a freestanding office building, then that's the lens through which you look at these questions.
Okay.
But I have a
Perfect.
question.
Theoretical question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Probably the same question. So if we were to grant this use variance and they were to, could they knock down this building and build a new office, a freestanding office building?
It would require site plan and SECRA would be reopened.
But they would be allowed, they would be allowed to pursue
Yes,
that. Without
absolutely.
okay.
Yep.
Yeah,
They can
that's
pursue it, doesn't mean it gets granted.
Would they end up back in front of the zoning board or no?
No.
Their use variance
Use
is an
variance
ace in the
runs with the
hole.
land. Yeah,
Right,
it runs
it's
with the
not
land.
it's not a grandfathering. Got it.
But there
Yeah.
would be a new secret determination made at that point.
Because under the site plan application. So
Right.
if the use variance were granted and we determined that this is a unique property, all the criteria have been fully met and they get granted, that means that freestanding office use is now permitted on this lot. If they decide that the building no longer works for them and they want to knock it down and propose a new freestanding office building, well, the village is granted a use variance and they can do that, but then it'll go through the SECRA process again through site plan. It would still require site plan. They're just not going to get a building permit. So then SECRA would be reopened there. So it's really just through the lens that we're looking at now is as the volume of the use is presently as a freestanding office building, do we have any moderate to significant negative impacts?
As the
That's your
building
lens.
stands now.
As it stands and the volume of use, the functionality of now, yes.
Right.
That's excellent because thank you for clarifying that. It's sometimes tricky to figure out
Smaller.
how far we have to look.
We're in a smaller box here.
Smaller box here. Great. So I mean, this is your SECRA, but they're not going to be touching the land. So I presume we can say a no on this one. Impact on geological features. Again, they're not going to be altering anything at this point. Impact on surface water. It's a no. Impact on groundwater, it's not changing anything. I think we're going to go through this. They're not impact on floodings, no. These are all going to end up being no because of how narrow our scope is in terms of it just not changing the existing building at all. The impact on aesthetic resources, again, this would be something that could be considered if the building were to change in the planning board. And there'd be no impact on these as well. Impact on open space and recreation is no.
And we can talk during this, right? And just
Yeah.
discuss this, right? Okay.
You're welcome to discuss, make a comment. I'm running through them, and they all are really related to construction. I'm also that so, and also for if this were a use that had maybe never been established there at all, it might apply. I'm not sure if
Much of it's no, because office use from an environmental perspective is a pretty benign use. We're not talking about mining activities here. So it's a pretty quick slide through, because the change really from a mixed use building from an environmental perspective to just architects are lovely and pretty benign, so they don't have massive negative environmental impacts.
And nothing is really
All
changed.
those slide rules.
Nothing is
Only
changed.
the work that we do does.
Yes, but sitting nicely at your lovely desks with your CAD.
That's the easy part, right? The trees that die in paper are far fewer than the ones that the buildings represented on the paper.
Yeah, you're not displacing any squirrels or anything until permit.
so.
Sorry,
So
Lee.
this is the point where we finally hit some that maybe you might have a opinion about. The consistency with community plans. The proposed action is not consistent with the adopted land use plans. I don't know. There's
Lee, before you go any further, Lou, did you have a comment on stuff that we've already looked at in the secret process, or you just the general?
No. I was curious if the village code requires a fully AF rather than a short for an unlisted.
Under the VCRA.
Yeah, it's not for an unlisted. You don't have to do a full.
Yeah, under the seeker amendments, it's the short.
It's the short.
We've been operating under the DEC law for a short.
Okay. It's up to us. It's up to the lead agency. It's just curious. It's a shorter form.
It's so honestly because it's all computerized now. They're pretty straightforward either way. But you can also request the long form if deemed necessary. Also, if any of these are indicated to be yes positives, you can request the long form because you're doing a more intense evaluation, I believe. But yeah, we don't require any So
I mean, the building's been there at CEU'd. I mean, as far as the character is concerned, we gave it a CEU back in '98, and it's obviously consistent with the character that's the RO district. We were under the impression it was operating that way anyway. So, I mean, I don't have a problem with the character community plans.
But 17C, that would definitely, I mean, right, it's definitely inconsistent with local land use or zoning regulations, right? If we were to grant that.
That's the very nature of a use variance. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's by definition pretty much, right?
Yeah.
So we end up with one area with moderate to large impact because it impacts that area. Anything else that?
Well, sorry, why would you call that moderate or large? Well, it's no, I say it's no or small. Got it. So I feel like it's a small impact only because the history of this zone is so muddy based upon it having relatively recently prior to that allowed freestanding offices, and there are so many of them that they actually have a stronger argument for having an office in that zone than if there had never been freestanding offices allowed.
Yeah, so just because it's yes doesn't mean you can't check the no or small. It's up to the board.
Yeah, so
I don't know. That was just my thought. It feels like a small impact given they've got some pretty hefty office buildings 2 doors up and then across the way down and.
Well, I mean, to me, this isn't like it's like a yes or no 17C. I mean, how can you have, I don't know, a proposed action that's only small, inconsistent with the land use plans or zoning regulations? I don't know.
I see what you're saying. It's inconsistent with the plans, but on the 18s that if we were to check yes on the 18, then we would still be marking no or small for the items that we chose.
Right.
Got it. I agree with that. Then. That makes sense.
Whenever a use variance is required, usually by DEC recommendations, it's moderate to large.
Okay. Well, it's because no or small is also it's synonymous with no. All right, fair enough.
And then what about, I mean, I don't know if it matters to belabor this more, but 17G, I mean, this is kind of what we were referring to before. The proposed action may induce secondary development impacts that are not included in the proposed action, right? That's what we were talking about before, where if we were to grant this use variance, they could knock down the building potentially and introduce a new
In
project,
theory.
right? I mean, I don't know if it matters, but
I'd say also you might want to keep in mind on that how small this lot is.
right, yeah, for sure.
They're not, no, I mean, totally outside the realm of what
Yeah,
someone's feelings might be. They take down that building, their parking's going to change. And I don't think anyone would be terribly interested. So yes, in theory and by law, could they? Sure. From a functional reality. Now, mind you, that you may want to hit moderate to large on that, but then in the next part say, you know, they're not going to do that.
right.
Yeah,
This would be a poor idea.
that is
So-
the other piece that you guys you don't usually, other than Lou, don't usually have to go this far through any secret process. But yeah, the next form that you would do after evaluating this is to address how each is going, any impacts would be.
Basically, anything that
moderate.
you type, that you put moderate or large, you have to explain in the part 3, which is the other form. But I just want to say, as part of what we're doing right now, if you look at the relevant part 1 questions and all those C2, C3, that's from the other form that the applicant submits as part of their application that triggers the start of the secret process. And so it may be beneficial for, and Allison, look to you and Lisa, for staff to go through this with the part 1 in front of them as they decide, you know, as they go through it first and answer these questions, and then maybe circulate to the board for our opinion on it.
Yeah,
we-
I'd be
we don't
happy
have
to
that
do
part
that. I usually do. It usually happens in the planning board where we generally have longer timelines on projects. So in this case, thought it was wise to go through some of this with you in person. But
It's very helpful to get to, but just for the, you know, my point is just for the record, to have the part 1 out in front of us and be looking at that when we make these decisions would be probably useful.
okay. So
We can always, we'll table this, fill it out and
yeah, circulate it to the
play
board.
more secret later.
And
I
we're
know you guys
already
never
at
get to
page
play with
10.
Seeker.
But it's good to know we've narrowed it down to just this section that we really have to take a closer look at. All right.
All right, team. I have a quick reminder, if you don't mind me popping in, making sure everyone's getting their education. They're taking their courses. You have your four measly 4 hours. And I'm going to do a quick New York Planning Federation plug. We have a ton of free webinars, both live and in the video bank. So if you need to get your hours in, NYPIF.org is the place to go. I think we have another one coming up next week. We have 2 webinars a month coming up right now. And as the village's members, you are all members, so it is free to attend.
Cindy, can you send out that link to everybody, please?
Yes,
Thank
I
you.
will. You're
Go
Go
welcome.
get your learning.
You think there'll be a conference this year in person?
No, we've done, so we did have our board meeting earlier this month. This year is just not possible. And even if we were to put one on, people are really not feeling getting together in groups yet. So this year, New York Planning Federation is doing, we're also not jumping in to do one of those terrible all-day conferences where you just stare at screens, because that's no fun for anybody either. So we're doing a 4-part information symposium, and we're going to be dialing into a couple of different topics and kind of getting more in depth, but also having some Q&A and participation portions. So it'll be a little bit more like a forum on specific items we're dealing with a lot, or we're seeing a lot of in the last year, rather than trying to just webinar you all to death. I mean, we'd all much rather be at the Sagamore.
Yeah.
We really would. But maybe next year, we'll see.
By the way, I heard today that the Suffolk County Village Official Association is looking to do another training, virtual training in May, possibly. So,
Okay, good.
Lots of options.
Yeah.
We're getting good at this web nonsense.
I'm done with it.
Yeah, I'm over it.
That being said, does anybody else have any other questions, comments?
Nope.
Evening, everyone. Have a good night.
Other than happy birthday, Lou.
Yeah.
Thank
Happy
you.
birthday, Lou.
It's not today, but it's very,
Monday.
very soon.
Monday. Yes.
Coming soon.
Oh, March
Monday,
Christmas.
Monday, fun day.
Yeah. We have to be
I
nice
made
to
you
him for a
turn
day.
pink. That was
You
fun.
know,
You
that was-
blushed.
Wait, Monday is 6, 20. I missed like a leap day, leap year birthday by a day or something.
Yep. March
There you
1st.
go.
Turning
Nice.
40. It's gonna be fun. I'll be working.
Welcome to the team, my friend.
Yeah, right.
No, you won't. I know where you'll be on Monday.
True. I have to.
All right, everyone. Have a good evening.
Everybody.